Welcome everybody to ConvergeML, and in today's video we'll go over 7 Git Stash commands. Now these are simple commands but super essential if you're working with Git. If you're just starting to learn Git, again, make sure you learn these 7 commands because they're going to be super useful in your journey to learning Git. So let's get started. So here we are in a directory, which is a Git Stash tutorial directory. And in this directory, what we're going to do is we'll start working with some files, go through 7 commands that I talked about, and just give you everything that you probably need when it comes to stashing. So the first thing that we will do here, this is at this point not a Git directory, because if I will just take a look at the contents of this directory, it says there is no .git directory, and .git directory actually makes something, it is actually tracking everything, and that makes a directory, a Git directory. Now, normally when you will clone a directory from GitHub or any, Bitbucket or something like that, they will, you will have a Git directory and you'll have that directory folder available. So let me just show you very quickly. So to make this directory a Git directory, I'll just say git init, right, and initialize. And you can see it's initialized empty Git directory. And at this point, if I just go back and hit enter, you'll see I've got this .git folder, and that's the folder where everything gets dragged. It's a hidden folder, that's why it has a dot in front of it. That's why if I do an ls, I won't see it, right? Okay. Next, what I will do here is I'll create a file. I'll call that file1.py. And maybe, at this point, this is in the main branch. And what I'll do is I will git add this file1.py and then commit this file, right? With a not so meaningful message at this point, but yeah. So file1, and that's my commit, right? Now, if I go and take a look at the status of my Git directory, everything is clean because we've just made the commit. So the file that we had, file1, we added it and we made a commit to that. Next, what we'll do is probably we'll create another file, call it file2.py. And maybe imagine we did some work with this file. And so I've got this file, these 2 files now. But if I look at Git status, you'll see that file2.py at this point is an untracked file. That means Git is not aware of this file. We would need to add this to the staging area and then commit, right? So we'll have to go through git add and then git commit. Now, normally what will happen is when I will, at this point, want to move to a new branch, for example. So let's say git checkout -b, let's call this new branch. And when I move there, what has happened is if I take a look at Git's status, I have that file2.py link going around. And maybe it has some, really crucial code, that the feature that I was working on. And what I want to do is just stash it away. I'm not going to commit it. I'm not going to add it, but I just want to, stash it away and just keep it in stashes. So the first command that I'm going to teach you is called git stash push. Now, if I don't enter git stash push, if I just write git stash, it's still going to, by default, it runs git stash push, right? So in this case, if I just say git stash push and I hit enter, you will see it says no local changes to save. That's because this is an untracked file, right? So what we have to do is we have to pass a flag here that says -u. So it's untracked -u. And as soon as I hit enter, you'll see it says saved working directory and index date, work in progress into this, right? So if I'll take a look at Git status, it says nothing to commit on this new branch. And if I take a look at, so here's another command, which is git stash list. So we have pushed our stash or our work into sort of a safe environment, into a stash. Where has it been saved? So to look at that, we type git stash list. And you can see it's here, right? It says stash at 0. That's sort of the identifier. And then it has this work in progress on new branch. It tells me which branch I was. This has the SHA. And then it says file 1, right? That's the file. Now, what we can do, maybe, we have this file. We'll create another file. So again, just to make sure, git status, nothing to commit. At this point, maybe I'll say that I'm going to create another file, say file3.py. And so again, git status, and you'll see this file3.py is hanging around there, right? Again, it's an untracked file at this point. So what we will do is maybe add this file 3.py, right? So again, git status, you'll see changes to be committed. So now it's been added. Git knows it's a new file and it's ready to be added. But maybe I don't want to commit it, and what I want to do is probably stash it away into, again, in that stash list and bring it up later on. So what I can do is I can say git stash push, and this time around I don't need the U flag because it's not an untracked file, it is tracked file. So I don't need that U flag. But now what I want to do is probably pass this push with a more meaningful message, like what was I working on. So I'll say an important I don't know, an important commit, for example, and I've just saved that. Now, if I go back with, again, git stash list, you will see I've got two stashes. I've got stash 1 and stash 0. So stash 0 is the latest stash. And it says, again, it's on a new branch, but then it has a very important commit. And it has a meaningful message attached to that. So basically, in the future, when you are looking at your stashes and you want to know, oh, what was I doing with this stash, you can actually read this message to identify what were you sort of kind of working on that, right? So really helpful. Now, again, the identifier stash 0, stash 1, and you can actually bring them, these stashes, back. Now, before I show you how to sort of bring them back, let's look at another command. So here, when I'm at this screen, I'm going to press Q, so I come out of that. So again, git status, nothing, and I'll write git touch another file. Let's say file4.py. I don't know. Yeah, I think I was doing file3. Yeah, file3. Yeah, file4.py. Once again, what I have is I've got an untracked file, right? Because I haven't added that. What next I'll do is I'll say git stash minus u, because this is an untracked file, minus m, and then I can again give a meaningful message, and add the important commit, right? So basically you can add different flags to this. Now, one thing that I didn't write here is push. I just said git stash and then the flags, right? But then you notice that, as I mentioned earlier, that when you write git stash without mentioning push, by default it is push, right? So in this case as well, again, if I go to this git stash list, I have all my stashes up there. Great, with the name here, another important commit. Again, I'm going to type Q to come back. I'm going to clean the screen at this point. Okay, so if I go and take a look at git status, it's a new, so nothing to commit. All my stashes are saved there. Imagine I want to bring a stash back And the stash that I want to bring back is probably the one that's the latest one, right? Which is stash at 0. So if I want to just bring back the latest stash, I can say git stash pop, right? And you can see that what has happened is two things have happened. I've got file4.py, which was the latest stash that has come back into my working directory at this point. It's an untracked file. But the other thing that has happened, it says it dropped ref stash 0. So what does that mean? That means if I go back to git stash list, only if I can type right. Okay, if I git stash list, you'll see that I've got only 0 and 1. Earlier I had 3 stashes, but now I have only 2, because what pop has done, it has popped it back. So it has given me the latest commit back, stash back, but also has dropped it from the stashes, right? And imagine that was not the intention. You don't want to drop the stash. So pop works great if you want to just bring it back and delete the entry in the stash. But imagine if that was not your scenario and you wanted to only bring something back, but still want to keep that list. So in order to do that, so what I'll do, so I will say git stash push, and again, it's an untracked file, -m. Yeah, it's -m, and maybe I'll say file for commit, something like that. Yeah, and hit enter. If I look at git stash list, I have the file for commit, right? That's the latest one that we have just added to the git stash list. Now I will pop this back, this one, but I will use the ID, the identifier, right? Stash at 0. So let's do that. Press Q, get back. Now another command, git stash apply, right? Git stash apply, and I'm going to type git stash at 0, right? So actually I can bring in 1, whatever, stash back, but let's say I'm bringing in 0. And once I hit that, I've got file4 back. But what has happened is that if I go back to git stash list, all 3 of them are still present. So it's not been dropped. And if for some reason you want to drop a specific stash, you can say git stash drop, and then you can say stash at, maybe you want to drop 2. So hit that, go back to git stash list, you'll see the second one has been dropped. I've got only 2 remaining. Hit Q to get back. Now, next, what we have to do is the last one, the last command that you need to know, which is git stash clear, right? So at this point, again, if I go to git stash list, I've got 2 stashes. What I want to do is I want to clear all my stashes, right? So I can, so basically just delete all of the stashes that are present. So I say git stash clear and hit enter. At this point, if I go back and say git stash list, there's nothing there. All right, so I just went through, I think, about 6 commands: git stash push, git stash list, git stash pop, git stash apply, drop, and clear. There's just one more that I just want to mention, that there was, so if I just, again, for, just let me create another file, say file 5.py, right? If I look at git status, again, I've got 4 and 5, for example, in this case. I've got an untracked sort of file. So let me just add these, file 4, just file 5, right? So .py, right? So I've done that. So now, if I look at git status, you will see I've got these 2 files available. And now what I want to do is push them again into a stash. So I used git stash push, but there is another command that's probably been deprecated, but you will see this out there in the wild. It's a Git Stash save, right? So you can just write Git Stash save and then probably leave a message, maybe say file 4 and file 5, right? Again, if I take a look at Git Stash list, you will see that's been, it's there in the stash as well. Hit Q, come back. So you'll see that Git Stash save also does very similar to push, but now push is just more powerful with flags, and yeah, it just does a little bit more. Yeah, but you will see this out there in the world. At this point, I will again just clear everything, so it's a clear directory, and take a look. Git status, nothing there. Git stash list, nothing there. That's it. Wonderful. So I hope this tutorial sort of gave you what you were looking for, and if this really helped you, it'll be great if you leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and I will bring more content that you like and love. See you soon. Goodbye.